God, I need to sit down, my arm's hurting. Hello, welcome back to 40k. In today's video we've got a 2,000 point list that we're going to be sharing with you today. Now I've not done this list on my own, I've had some help today from one of our Discord members, Loot and Scoot. So I just wanted to make that very clear, this is a shared collaboration. Now we've had some back and forth within the list, but we've kind of come to a nice compromise now. But yeah, it's a 2,000 point list. Now before we get into the actual list, if you've yet to check out the members area, click the join button down below just for more information on how you can actually support the channel. Every single penny that is donated to the channel comes straight back into the channel itself. We're buying studio tech, the lighting, and as already mentioned in some previous videos, we want to be battle report ready by the 10th edition. Now in fact, I've got a shout out for one of you guys in particular, in fact, for joining our elite members area, which is fantastic. So shout out to you, and you're going to be getting your own personal title in our Discord server. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Okay guys, so there's going to be 4 chapters within this video today. First we're going to be talking of course about the 2,000 point list itself. We're then going to talk about the secondary objectives that are going to relate to our list. We're going to then talk about the tactics, and then finally all the command protocols that we're going to select for our actual list today. So to begin the list, of course, we need a dynasty code. And in this list we're going to be taking the Mefrit dynasty. Again, not something I normally take, but we're going with the Mefrit dynasty today, so you're going to get that 3-inch extra range for all your range attacks, apart from pistols of course. You're then going to get the extra -1 AP if you're firing at half range, and the protocol of Vengeful Stars, you're going to be able to get both the directives as opposed to one directive, if that's your active protocol. So now when I normally do these list videos, I normally go through them in Battlefield Role order. In this video we're going to kind of go through the synergies as opposed to the actual order itself. But the first thing we're going to talk about is one of the HQ models within this list, and it's going to be a Technomancer. Now this Technomancer is going to have the Canoptic Cloak, so it's going to have that 10-inch movement with the fly keyword, and it can be healing models within close proximity, D3 lost wounds. Now they've of course got to be within the same dynasty code, that's no problem. Now we're also going to be spending 1 command point to gain a relic within this list, and that's going to be of course the Veil of Darkness relic. I don't leave home without a Veil of Darkness. So to go with this first HQ within the list, we've gone with a unit of 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers. Now I quite like Locust Heavy Destroyers, as you guys know already. Another unit that virtually makes every single one of my lists. And the Technomancer is going to go with that unit to be able to reliably bring one back each and every turn if needed. And also being able to heal one of the models back. It makes the unit a real strong compact unit. Now they will be providing the Technomancer with that Lookout Sir ability when there's 3 models. But once we do lose one model, that Lookout Sir ability does go. But we've got plans for that, so stick around and you'll see what we're doing. Okay, on to the second piece of synergy within this list. We've got another Technomancer. And again with the Canoptic Cloak, 10-inch movement with the fly keyword again. But this time we're going to have 2 units of 20 Necron Warriors. And these Necron Warriors are going to have the Gorse Reapers, so they're strength 5, -2 AP and 1 damage. Now they are only 12-inch range, but we are playing the Mefrit dynasty, so that will go up to a 15-inch range. And while they're with the Technomancer, of course, the Technomancer can be bringing back D3 warriors every single turn. In fact, you can even use the ability twice in a given turn with the stratagem, but again, we'll talk about that kind of stuff later in the tactics. So far, we're trying to build a battalion detachment, as you've probably already guessed. We've already got the 2 HQ slots covered, and we've got 2 out of the 3 minimum units that we need in the troop selection. So we need 1 more troop option, and we're going to throw a minimum unit of Immortals in there, 80 points, just to make sure we've got the troops in there and the list is actually legal. Now these Immortals are going to have the Gorse Blasters, they're likely going to be staying on our home objective, we'll talk about them later, but yeah, we've got the troops all covered up, so we can move on to the rest of the list here. Okay, so now I wanted to talk about some of the elite selections that we're going to be bringing into our list today. Now it's quite action packed in terms of elites, we've got quite a number of selections here. To begin, we're going to have a unit of 10 Death Marks. Now, Death Marks have got a lot of advantages in the game at present. Apart from the obvious, the fact that they can ignore the Lookout Sir ability, that isn't the main reason why we're going to be taking them today. It's going to be more of a tactical element, and we're going to be talking about that when we mention the secondary objectives. Just bear in mind these guys had the Dimensional Translocation ability, so they've got the ability to deep strike if we wanted to. However, this unit is likely not going to be deep striking, they're going to be within our deployment zone during deployment, because we've got other units that are going to be deep striking, which are coming up next. Now as for the second unit within the elite selections, we've got another unit of Death Marks. It's only a 5-man unit this time, not a 10-man. Now these are going to be one of the units that is going to be deep striking in to enemy backlines, there's a little hint there. This is only a 5-man unit, don't expect too much damage from it, but for me they're much better than taking flayed ones. They're toughness 5, they've got a 3-up armor save, they can still fire with their weapons, and if they've got the protocol active where they're going to be doing actions and still firing, then yeah, that's a real advantage to Death Marks. God, I need to sit down, my arm's hurting. Anyway, the next one on the list is the Transcendent Catan Shard. Now originally we wanted a more stronger Catan Shard, however we didn't want to put too many points into this, so both myself and Luton Scooter kind of agreed a Transcendent Catan Shard is pretty much a cheaper alternative to actually having one of the named Catan Shards. They're only 230 points, so yeah, a much cheaper alternative. Now with the fractured personality ability that the Transcendent Catan Shards have, we've gone with the Cosmic Tyrant. This just simply grants the Catan Shard an additional power to use in that given movement phase. So this one's going to be using 2 Catan powers as opposed to 1. Now as for those Catan powers, we've gone with the Antimatter Meteor as well as the Sky of Falling Stars. Now of course these are interchangeable game by game, but if we don't know our opponent and we're going in blind, they're the 2 that we're going to be going with. Now the Antimatter Meteor is probably the most commonly used one out of all the Catan powers. It's got a decent range of 24 inches, and as long as you don't roll a 1 or a 2, they're going to be suffering 3 mortal wounds, or potentially D3 plus 3 mortal wounds if you roll a 6. Now as for the Sky of Falling Stars, it's again a 24 inch range, so a decent range there. All you have to do is roll less than the amount of models in the opposing unit, and it can also be a roll of a 6. And that's going to be 3 units within 24 inches for D3 mortal wounds. Plenty of mortal wounds being sprayed out there, especially going up against elite units. That's going to really hinder them. Now jumping into the fast attack slots for the moment, we're going to be taking a unit of Canoptic Scarab Swarms. Now the reason for taking the Canoptic Scarab Swarm, Transcendent Catan Shard needs a screening unit. We don't want to be the target of say a smite attack for example, especially when this thing's going to be going right up the board at the very front of our actual army. It's going to be a huge target, so we need to screen it as well as we possibly can. So yeah, a unit of 5 Canoptic Scarab Swarms will do that just fine. Okay, so we've got some more elite units within this actual list. Next we've got the Hexmark Destroyer. Now a lot of you are probably wondering, why have you got a Hexmark Destroyer? They're not that great, and it doesn't gain all the advantages from the Mephit Dynasty because of course these things carry pistols and they don't get the extra 3-inch range. Now as I keep mentioning, all will be revealed in the tactics section, but for now we've got a Hexmark Destroyer at 65 points. Now the Hexmark Destroyer is going to be another one of our deep strike options within this list, so that would be the second deep strike option in fact if you take the 5 death marks as well, but we're actually going to have a third option. And this is a 15-point option, it's the Canoptic Plasmasides. So for only 15 points, of course it's got to stay with the Destroy Cult unit. We've just mentioned the Hexmark Destroyer. We'll talk about that later in secondaries. So by my calculations, the list is up to 1,500 points. So we've got 500 points spare to spend on some more units. Now we deliberated about this for quite a number of evenings on the Discord, and we kind of couldn't come up with an alternative option. We didn't really want to do this, but we didn't really have a choice. So we're going to have the Silent King. Now he does kind of work pretty nice within this list, so it was really hard to not take him, even though we didn't really want to take him. We wanted to be a little bit more unique, but the Silent King is within this list. And of course if you're taking that Supreme Command Detachment, you're going to be gaining a refund on your battalion detachment. So that extra battalion detachment is not going to cost you additional 3 command points, you're going to be getting that returned. Now furthermore, the Silent King has also got the ability called the Silent King, so therefore you're going to actually have 3 additional command points before the game actually begins. So before the Silent King was in the list, when we're playing a Strike Force battle, you're going to have 6 command points. We're going to gain an additional 3 for the Silent King's ability, and we actually spent 1 on that relic previously with the Technomancer, with the Veil of Darkness relic, so now we're going to be down to 8 command points. So that's what we're going to be starting the game off with, 8 command points. That's quite a large amount of command points to be fair, and we're going to be gaining 1 on every single command phase. So that leaves us in fact with 100 points left within the list. Again, we kind of and ahed what we're going to be adding to this list, and Luton Scoot kind of had an idea. He said, you know what, I quite like my Locust Heavy Destroyers in single units. I actually oppose the option. I prefer them in a unit of 3 with a Technomancer. He likes to spread them out into individual models, if you've got the space available of course in your battlefield rolls. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because we've got 100 points left, Locust Heavy Destroyers are 50 points a model, so we've just thrown in 2 additional single units of Locust Heavy Destroyers. This is going to give us an additional bit of firepower, a bit more anti-tank. They're of course going to have the Gauss Destructors, very similar to the previous unit. I mean, there's no real reason to take the other weapon, is there? So in total we're going to have 5 of these Locust Heavy Destroyers, 3 of them in one unit, 1 in another, and 1 in one more unit, I guess. So that in fact closes the list at 2,000 points on the nose. So yeah, let's move on to the secondary objectives. Take 2. So this is actually the next day. I managed to lose all my footage for some reason, the file corrupted. So this is the next day of recording, so we're going to give it another try here. So we're going on to the secondary objectives that we're going to select for this list today. So the first one of course is going to be the Code of Combat. That's going to be for the Silent King of course. Now the second one is going to be Treasures of Aeons. And then the last one, we're kind of torn between 2, and it kind of depends on who you're going up against. So it's either going to be Behind Enemy Lines or Purge the Vermin. We'll kind of talk about this more in the tactics section of the video. Now in fact, let's move into the tactics section of the video. I'm going to turn the camera off because I kind of need a full screen to show you what we're going to be doing. Okay, so tactic wise, let's break down the list and kind of talk about what all the units are going to be doing, as well as of course the secondary objectives as we just mentioned. So the first unit I wanted to talk about is the Transcendent Catan Shard. This is going to be front and centre, it's going to be rushing forward, then it's going to kind of go peeling off in any direction it kind of pleases, go after the biggest and baddest because of course it's got quite a nice punch in melee, and of course we want to be getting those Catan powers off to the valued targets. Now with that Necrodermis ability, with that 4+ invulnerable save, it's going to give it some survivability, and of course you can only lose 3 wounds in a given phase. So as mentioned previously, going up against certain factions, they could potentially really struggle against Catan Shard. So synergy wise, we're going to be taking those 5 Canoptic Scarab Swarms, and we're going to be putting them in front of our Transcendent Catan Shard, and we're simply going to be screening them off. In particular, if you're going up against psychic factions such as Thousand Suns, Tyranids, Grey Knights, you don't want your Transcendent Catan Shard taking any wounds in the psychic phase. That's a Catan Shard's weakness, taking 3 wounds in the psychic phase, and of course in the shooting phase and the fight phase, it's going to be gone within a turn. So by having these Canoptic Scarab Swarms, taking those smite attacks and other psychic witchfire abilities, 15 points of base, you can afford to let that go. Now further to add to this, these Canoptic Scarab Swarms can of course tie up models that are potentially going to try and fire at our Catan Shard, or maybe they want to get into an engagement range and again tie up our Catan Shard when we don't really want our shard in that particular fight. So those Canoptic Scarab Swarms are pretty much there as a bit of a shield for our Catan Shard there. Now, when we're bringing the Silent King into the list, of course he brings that My Will Be Done ability, and he can be using it twice, so on 2 different units, and of course we've got 2 large Necron warrior units, 20-man blobs, so My Will Be Done with the Pharaon ability, of course that's going to be nice. Then of course the Pharaon of Stars aura, so Necron core units within 6 inches get to reroll all the hit rolls at range. So not only are they hitting on 2s, but they're also re-rolling the 1s as well. And then further to add to that, the Relentless March aura is to add 1 inch to core units within 6 inches. Now there are some other buffs for fighting in engagement range, but warriors aren't really there to be fighting in engagement range. Don't get me wrong, they can do a job, particularly in the Novak dynasty, but that's not what we're playing today. So this will hopefully interact with the treasures of Aeon's secondary objective, because we hopefully want to be swarming 1 or even 2 objectives in the centre of the battlefield, in the no man's land. We want our warriors completely swarming around those objectives. Now don't get me wrong, you can get through warriors quite easily, but they can also pack a punch with their Gorse Reapers. Strength 5, -2 AP, 1 damage. Okay, against Armour of Contempt it is only -1 AP, but there's a lot of firepower there. With 2 units of these Necron warriors, that's going to be 80 shots there. Now bear in mind again, we're playing the Mefret dynasty, so it isn't just 12 inches, it's now 15 inches, and anything at 7.5 inches or less, going to get that extra bit of AP as well. And maybe we also just want to advance with our Necron warriors, because their weapons have got the assault keyword as opposed to the rapid fire keyword, so yeah, they will be hitting on 4s, but with the Silent King it's a +1 to hit, so that'll bring it back to a 3+, and they reroll everything. It's not just reroll 1s, it's rerolling everything there. Now as for the Silent King himself, of course we've got the Code of Combat secondary objective, so he needs to be taking units out. Now preferably with the rest of your army you kind of minimise units so that the Silent King can then finish the unit off and then score either 3 or 4 victory points, depending on whether it was at range or in melee. Now of course there is a slight weakness here. The Silent King is the only unit that can actually score Code of Combat in this list. So we are fully aware that if the Silent King does go down, we're not going to be scoring any more points for Code of Combat, but he is just too good to not take with all the buffing capabilities he has for pretty much any Necron list at the moment. Now what you need to bear in mind is if your opponent does target the Silent King early, we've still got that Transcendent Catan Shard running up the board in their face, doing a lot of damage. So yeah, they may deny us with the Code of Combat, but they're going to take a lot of casualties with that Transcendent Catan Shard combined with the 5 Locust Heavy Destroyers that are within our list. They're the high priority targets, so some opponents may not even go for the Silent King until maybe turn 3. Now going back to those Necron warriors, to keep them up and running, we're going to be using one of those Technomancers. Now that Technomancer is going to be sort of running in between both of these units, maybe behind the Silent King. Now unfortunately that Technomancer can't be healing that Silent King model because the Technomancer is from the Mefret dynasty, and of course the Silent King isn't, so that synergy won't be working. However, he'll be bringing back D3 Lost Warriors every single turn, and if you want to use it on both the units, you've got the Deathless Arise stratagem for a command point to effectively use Rites of Reanimation a second time. Now in the backfield we've got quite a lot of units here. I mean, we'll go through them all. We've got the 5-man Immortal unit, that's probably going to be a unit that stays on our home objective, but can venture out to a nearby objective if needed. Again, maybe assisting in scoring Treasures of Aeons. Toughness 5 with a 3+ armor save. Okay, they will go down at some point, If your opponent wants to waste firepower on this minimal unit, then yeah, let them go ahead. For me, it would be a little bit of a waste targeting these guys when we've got quite a lot of other units that can effectively do what they're doing anyway. They were pretty much just attacks because we needed 3 troops to gain battalion detachment. Now we're also going to have that 10-man unit of death marks. They're going to be in the backfields. They're of course going to be sniping out characters, ignoring that lookout sir ability, strength 5, -2 AP, 1 damage. 6 is the wound, will cause a mortal wound on top of the damage, and what you want to also be doing is using the talent for annihilation stratagem for a command point, which is the Mefrit stratagem, and this is very similar to the Deathmark's actual ability within their weapon. Any unmodified wound roll of a 6 will inflict a mortal wound to a maximum of 3 in that given phase. So any 6s to wound with that stratagem will now effectively be 2 mortal wounds as opposed to 1, so against the character model in particular, that can be absolutely devastating. Now this Deathmark unit has also got another utility within this list. They're going to be screening our deployment zone from enemy units coming in from deep strike, strategic reserves for example. So we want to be screening that out so your opponent can't be scoring things such as behind enemy lines, engage on all fronts. Now don't get me wrong, they can still score them of course, but we're trying to minimise the threat by spanning these guys out and screening off our deployment zone. Now what else have we got in the backfield? We've got the 3-man unit of Locust Heavy Destroyers. They're going to be going around with the Technomancer for the first few turns anyway, because the Technomancer can of course be reviving one of these Locust Heavy Destroyers, as well as actually healing one of them D3 lost wound a turn. Now if the opponent isn't going after the Catan Shard, then they're quite likely going to be going for the Locust Heavy Destroyers. They're going to be one of our biggest anti-tank units within this actual list, and your opponent is not going to like the 3d3 damage from every single weapon. So yeah, the Technomancer's going with those. That's just for the early rounds. Now if you're able to actually eliminate all the tanks and monsters within your opponent's list, then yeah, the Technomancer probably isn't needed there, and he can go off and assist with the warriors in the midfield. Then don't forget, we've of course got 2 1-man units of Locust Heavy Destroyers as well, which are going to be lurking around on the sides, just to gain a different angle, because maybe the 3-man unit doesn't quite have the angle because of terrain features and whatnot, but ideally you want to be sticking these things on top of terrain features. Maybe you're going to be getting a cover save, maybe they're in dense cover, behind some line of sight blocking terrain, so that they can't be targeted as easily. But the reason for the single models, as opposed to having another unit of say 2 of them, because a lot of the time, if your opponent is targeting these things, they're going to overkill them. And if they're overkilling them, when they're in a unit of 3 of them, of course the damage is going to go to all 3 models, whereas if they're split into individual units, the damage isn't going to pass on to the next model. So your opponent's got to make a choice whether to put a lot of gunfire into that single model, or probably underperform and not take it out at all. Now as for the last bit of tactics, this is going to relate to behind enemy lines. Now you're probably wondering why we chose behind enemy lines when we've got ancient machineries available, maybe even raise the banners, and well yeah, I'll explain why. So we've got 3 units that are going to be going into the deep strike reserves. We've got a 5-man unit of death marks, we've got the Hexmark Destroyer, and we've also got the Plasma Sight. Now with behind enemy lines, you're going to be scoring 2 victory points if you've got a single unit wholly within your opponent's deployment zone, and you're going to be scoring 4 victory points if you've got 2 or more units wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. So we've actually got 3 opportunities here because we've got 3 different units deep striking in. They don't necessarily all have to go in on turn 2, but the Plasma Sight will not be able to go in on its own because it needs to stay within 6 inches of a destroyer cult unit, otherwise it will be destroyed in the morale phase. But why we've added the Plasma Sight in, the Hexmark Destroyer is one single model, very easy to deep strike it in, right in the corner of the battlefield. Okay, sometimes your opponent can screen it off quite well, but this is a 2,000 point game. The board size is quite big, so you should be able to find a slot for a Hexmark Destroyer and a Canoptic Plasma Sight. So instantly, as soon as these 2 guys are going in, that's going to be scoring you 4 points per turn, and now your opponent has to decide whether they're going to go targeting the Hexmark Destroyer, because they can't actually target the Plasma Sight unless it's the closest eligible model. So if you've actually managed to hide him behind an obscuring terrain feature as well, that's even better, because your opponent is now literally forced to come and deal with Hexmark Destroyer, and they're going to have to do it in melee. They're not going to be able to do it at range. They're not going to have the angles if you're behind obscuring terrain. So for a model that only costs you 65 points, add 15 points as well for the Plasma Sight I guess, but your opponent is going to end up losing a lot more points just trying to deal with your Hexmark Destroyer. Now we've got the 5-man Deathmark unit as a backup plan. I mean, they'll probably go in on turn 2, maybe turn 3. The earlier the better of course, because you want to be scoring maximum points, but turn 3 is probably more ideal because you do score at the end of your own turn anyway. So if you've got the Hexmark in and the Plasma Sight in, you kind of don't really need the death marks in, or maybe you just want to keep the Plasma Sight behind, because the Plasma Sight can sit in reserves and wait a turn because he's not officially on the board, so he can't be destroyed in the morale phase. And if you get really lucky, maybe you can put the Hexmark Destroyer in amongst that 5-man Deathmark unit, so that they provide the Hexmark Destroyer with the Lookout Sir ability, because of course he's a character model. That way you're guaranteeing when the Plasma Sight does come in, you're still actually able to survive past the morale phase. That may actually be the better way, because then you can actually fire with your death marks, again at character models. And now what you may be thinking is, what if the Hexmark Destroyer dies? the plasma sight is also going to go. Then you've only got one single unit that can score behind enemy lines, which is of course the death marks. Now yes, that at first is true. Don't forget, models can just make their way to the enemy deployment zone, but furthermore, we do have a Veil of Darkness relic on one of those Technomancers, so we can be taking an entire unit of warriors back there. We can virtually be taking any core unit within 3 inches of the bearer into the enemy deployment zone. The only unit we can't take is the Silent King because again, it's not the same dynasty code, it's not in the Mephrit dynasty, but any other model will be eligible. So that's sort of our failsafe to score behind enemy lines, but mainly we're relying on that dimensional translocation ability. It's also going to split your opponent's mind in terms of where they're going to actually start targeting as well, because if they're trying to push forward to the mid-ground objectives in the no man's land, where our warriors are trying to occupy that space, but now they may not even want to leave their deployment zone because they want to screen it off. This will actually assist our Necron warriors even further, because yeah, there's less models that are going to get into engagement range with our Necron warriors, which is of course a weakness to the Necron warriors. They don't want to get in a fist fight, so by holding your opponent's units back to screen off behind enemy lines is a little bit of a tactic in itself. And maybe by the time they've dealt with the Hexmark Destroyer and the Death Marks, our warriors are now completely owning the centre of the battlefield, which is kind of what we want. Treasures of Aeons, primary objectives, and hopefully as well Code of Combat. Now we don't have to use behind enemy lines. We do have the option of using Purge the Vermin instead of behind enemy lines. And Purge the Vermin works much better against factions such as Death Guard, who are not that quick at moving into our quarters, or maybe factions such as Tau, that want to stay back and shoot. Again, they don't want to get into our quarters. They are going to be screening off their backline, so therefore the Hexmark Destroyer and the Death Marks and the Plasma Sight are going to struggle to get into those actual backlines. So that's where you pull out Purge the Vermin as opposed to behind enemy lines. So yeah, before getting into command protocols part of the video, just to sort of recap on the tactics, we've pretty much got 4 different battlefield groups within this actual list, but they are interchangeable and have a lot of flexibility. So for example, the Silent King and the 2 bricks of Necron warriors, they can start as a battlefield group, but eventually that Silent King is probably going to go off on his own and the Technomancer will likely replace him. You then got the battlefield groups such as Locust Heavy Destroyers, your 10-man Death Mark unit, possibly the Immortals. They're doing that job of screening the backfield. You then got the pressure units such as the Catan Shard, as well as of course the Silent King. He'll then develop into that battlefield group. And then finally we've got those deep striking units, which are going to tactically assist us with Treasures of Aeons, helping the warriors out, and of course scoring behind enemy lines. Now if we were to select Purge the Vermin, then of course we probably wouldn't be deep striking all of those units. Maybe the Hexmark Destroyer at a push going up against Toughness 3 kind of factions. But yeah, the 5-man Deathmark unit may as well start on the battlefield and get some shots nice and early. Okay, so then we come on to the final chapter in this video, which is the protocols that we're going to be taking within this list. So to start us off with, we're going to talk about the protocol that we're going to be using for the entire game, which is going to be the Conquering Tyrant. And we're specifically looking at the fallback and shoot option, because of course we've got a lot of Necron warriors and they don't want to be getting caught up in engagement range, because that will literally nullify quite a large amount of our list in terms of points and firepower. So being able to fall back, okay, it is a -1 to hit, but that Silent King will hopefully buff that unit with a +1 to hit and to reroll all the hit rolls as well. It just saves us having 1 or 2 Royal Wardens within this actual list. So that's the all game protocol. We've got that for every single battle round active. Now split the following command protocols up into 2 sections here. So the first one is going up against a shooty kind of faction. So not one that likes to get in your face, it's more likely one that's going to stay back and simply just take shots at your army. So this is the order in which I would select my command protocols going up against a shooty faction. So turn 1 I would be using Eternal Guardian, and I'd be using it for that cover save if the units haven't moved. That's going to help our resiliency, particularly turn 1, and especially when you go second as well in those type of games where sometimes you don't even get to use certain units because they're being lost before you've actually got a chance to use them. That's the worst. But yeah, giving them a cover save will definitely help. Turn 2 I'll be using Sudden Storm just to get that bit of movement. You want to be moving up the board, especially with the Necron warriors. Maybe you want to reposition your Locust Heavy Destroyers or maybe some Immortals, get them onto a certain objective. That's what I'd do in turn 2. Turn 3, Protocol of Vengeful Stars, and we're going to be getting both of those directives because we're playing the Mephrit Dynasty. Hopefully we're going to be getting our shots out at that stage, because of course the Ghost Reapers don't have the best range, so by turn 3 I would hope the Necron Warriors do have some sort of range against enemy units. Turns 4 and turns 5 in terms of the protocols I'm not too fussed about. Turn 4 I'll put Undying Legion just to reroll an additional reanimation protocols roll. Yeah, it's not that great, whatever. And turn 5, Protocol of Hungry Void. Maybe we're caught up in combat, but yeah, we've got no other options there, that's what we're going to be using. Now, if you're going up against a melee type faction, maybe you're going up against Blood Angels or a massive mob of Orc Boys perhaps. There's plenty of other examples within the 40k game. Now what I would do, I would have the same order, except I would switch around turn 1 and turn 3. But I would also change one of the directives, so let me explain. Turn 1 I would now be using the Vengeful Stars protocol, gaining both the directives because we're Mephra again. You could potentially have this in turn 2 if you wanted to. Maybe your opponent is going to get that close to you. Kind of depends who you're going up against. If you're going up against a really fast melee based faction such as Tyranids, then yeah, I'd want this in turn 1. But if it is a slow melee based faction, then yeah, you could have it turn 2 if you wanted to. The option is there. Now for this list, I've got turn 2, exactly the same, a bit of movement, get yourself into position. Turn 3, Eternal Guardian, and it's not for the cover save this time. Now it's for that 5+ Overwatch. And you've changed the directive here accordingly to the opposing player's list here. That 5+ Overwatch, especially for Necron warriors again, that could be 40 Ghost Reaper shots at strength 5. You're hitting on a 5+, and you're re-rolling everything if the Silent King is there. You should be getting quite a lot of hits from that, and it's not even your turn, it's your opponent's charge phase. So yeah, that's going to do a lot of damage, and it could even prevent your opponent from actually going for the charge in the first place. Then yeah, turn 4, turn 5, Undying Legions and Hungry Void. They're not that great in this kind of list, but you've got to put them there. So that is the 2000 point alternative list that Loot and Scoot and myself have created. Let me know what you think about this list in the comments below. Now we've gone for something different. We could have quite easily chosen Ancient Machineries, Purge the Vermin, Treasures of Aeons. With Eternal Conquerors and Relentless Expansionists, that's quite a common one. Now the reason why we've gone for something more alternative, because sooner or later people that are playing against Necron armies are going to kind of work out what we're going to be trying to do. It's getting kind of obvious, kind of predictable, and they're going to be working us out and what the best units are to take against a Necron player. So we've gone against the grain here, we've kind of gone for something a little bit different. Behind enemy lines, that isn't too quirky, don't get me wrong, but I don't think your opponent is going to expect it when they're designing a list against a Necron player. So guys, on your exits, remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you found it quite useful. And in fact, let me know if you do use this list. Let me know in the comments below how it fared, how it played out. And a big thank you, of course, for Loot and Scoot for helping provide this list today. So shout him out in the comments if you see him. Alternatively, you can jump on the Discord and let us know there in the Post Your Games section of the server. So all that's left to say, guys, is thank you all for watching. See you next time.